The galaxy was in turmoil. Far beyond the crowded streets of Earth, in the deep stretches of space, dozens of alien civilizations had once formed an alliance to protect each other. Together, they had built a peaceful network of worlds, sharing technology and knowledge. They were supposed to stand strong, united against any enemy that threatened them. But when the invasion came, everything changed. The threat was unlike anything they had ever faced, a race of strange, powerful machines that consumed planets in a blink of an eye. Entire systems vanished from the map as these creatures destroyed everything in their path. They didn't communicate. They didn't negotiate. They just destroyed. At first, the Alliance stood together. But when the machines began their attack, the situation grew worse. One by one, the member species began to retreat, abandoning their allies in fear. Some sought safety in distant corners of the galaxy, while others locked their gates and chose to hide, hoping the invaders would move on. For the smaller races, the ones with no military power, this was a death sentence. The Threxians, a proud and powerful species with their homeworld located at the edge of the galaxy, had always been key members of the Alliance. They were known for their advanced technology and their loyalty to their friends. But when the crisis hit, the Threxians found themselves fighting alone. The other members of the Alliance had turned their backs, leaving them to defend themselves as the machines advanced toward their cities. Captain Elias Carter and his crew were on a routine patrol near the border of human space when they received a distress call from the Threxian capital. The message was urgent, desperate even. "We are alone," it said. "All allies have abandoned us. We need help. Please, we are at the mercy of the machines." For a moment, Carter stood still, staring at the message in disbelief. How could this happen? How could an entire alliance of species turn their backs on one of their own? The Threxians were not only their friends but their strongest allies. The humans had worked side by side with them for decades, sharing knowledge and resources. Yet now, they were abandoned in their greatest time of need. Carter felt a deep anger rise in his chest, but there was no time for that now. They had to act fast. He immediately ordered his ship, the Endurance, to change course. The crew had no idea what they were about to face, but they knew one thing: this was not a mission they could ignore. The Endurance was a mid-sized warship, equipped for exploration, but with a small complement of weapons and defensive systems. It wasn't a fleet, not by any means, but it was all they had. Carter didn't care about the odds. The Threxians needed help, and they would be there. As they entered the Threxian system, the sight before them was chilling. The once vibrant planet was now a shadow of its former self. Plumes of smoke rose from shattered cities. The skies were filled with the remnants of destroyed ships, both human and alien. The machines had already arrived, and they showed no signs of slowing down. The human fleet, just a handful of ships compared to the might of the alien empires, approached the planet. Carter's heart pounded in his chest. What could they do? They had no vast armies, no massive starships like the Threxians or the others in the Alliance. All they had was their will, their courage, and their refusal to turn their backs on those in need. Carter transmitted a message to the Threxian command. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the Endurance. We are here to help. Tell us where to strike." A shaky voice came through the communication system, weak but filled with hope. We didn't think anyone would come. You're the first. Our people are scattered. We are fighting to survive, but we are outmatched. Please, Captain, we need your assistance." Carter's eyes narrowed. "Stay strong. We will do what we can." As the Endurance entered the atmosphere, the crew readied themselves. The machines were unlike anything they had ever encountered. Massive, unfeeling, and relentless. But Carter was determined to prove that humanity's strength lay not in numbers or technology, but in their heart. They had always believed in helping those in need. Now they would show the galaxy just what that meant. Carter turned to his crew. "Prepare for ground operations. We're not just here to fight. We're here to save lives." The ship's engines roared as they made their descent toward the Threxian capital. Carter knew this mission would test everything humanity stood for. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded by danger. But they had something no one else had: hope, and the will to fight for it. As the Endurance landed on the cracked surface of the Threxian world, Carter gave one last command. Let's show them what humans are made of. As the Endurance touched down on the charred surface of the Threxian capital, the crew was filled with a mix of nervous excitement and grim determination. Captain Elias Carter stood at the front of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the planet below. The once thriving city was now a battlefield. The skies were heavy with dark smoke, and the air hummed with the faint sound of distant explosions. Carter's heart beat faster. This wasn't just a mission to assist. It was a stand against the darkness threatening to consume the galaxy. He turned to his crew, many of whom were young and inexperienced in real combat, but all of whom were willing to face whatever came their way. "We've trained for this," Carter said, his voice steady. "No one thought we'd be here, but here we are. The Threxians need us, and we're not going to let them down." A chorus of quiet affirmatives echoed through the room. The Endurance wasn't built for long-term planetary operations, but Carter had no choice. They would make do with what they had. Outside, the scene was even worse than they imagined. The streets of the capital were littered with debris, burned buildings, and wreckage from fallen ships. The Threxians had fought valiantly, but their defenses had been overwhelmed by the machines. What remained was a city struggling to hold on, fighting to stay alive. Carter ordered a team to prepare for immediate ground operations. It wasn't just about stopping the machines. It was about saving lives. He could see families in hiding, civilians afraid to move, their world falling apart around them. Humanity wasn't just here to fight an enemy. It was here to restore hope. Sergeant Lee, Carter called to his communications officer, "Establish contact with the Threxian resistance. We need their coordinates and intelligence on the enemy's position." "Right away, Captain," Lee replied, tapping into the radio frequencies. Moments later, a shaky transmission crackled through the comms. "This is Threxian General Tarek," a voice, heavy with exhaustion, said. "We've been holding out for days, but our numbers are thinning. The enemy is everywhere. They adapt quickly, and we can't predict their movements. We need your help, Captain. We can't last much longer." Carter nodded, his jaw tight. "We're coming to you, General. Stay alive. We'll hold the line." The ground team suited up and prepared for the mission. The Endurance's crew had trained for this: fast, precise, and ruthless. But nothing could fully prepare them for the sight they were about to face. The team disembarked from the ship, their boots crunching on the cracked, scorched earth. They had barely landed before the first enemy drones appeared in the distance. The machines were terrifying in their design. Large, mechanical beasts with cold, glowing eyes. Their movements were quick and fluid, as if they were an extension of the environment itself. But what shocked the humans even more was their silence. There were no war cries, no shouts of command. Just the cold sound of metal scraping against metal as the machines advanced, marching relentlessly toward their targets. "Form up," Carter barked, raising his weapon. The human team quickly arranged themselves into defensive positions, using whatever cover they could find. The Threxian soldiers, though wary, stood alongside them, their weapons still ready despite the exhaustion in their eyes. "Remember your training," Carter reminded his team, his voice calm despite the rising tension. "We do this together. Focus, and we'll get through it." The first wave of machines struck swiftly. The human soldiers fired their weapons in perfect unison, and the Threxians returned fire with their powerful energy guns. The machines, though heavily armored, began to fall, but for every one that went down, 2 more appeared. They were endless. Carter's heart raced as the battle unfolded. The machines didn't seem to care about strategy. They just attacked, relentlessly, with no regard for their own survival. They were like a storm, impossible to predict and harder to stop. "They're not human," Private Jenna Martinez, one of the younger crew members, said in a shaky voice as she watched the machines advance. "They don't think like us. They just keep coming." "We'll make them think differently," Carter replied. He had no doubt in his mind. Humanity wasn't about to back down, no matter how impossible the odds. The human team fought side by side with the Threxians, their movements synchronized as they pushed the machines back, one step at a time. But it was clear that this battle wasn't going to be won with weapons alone. The machines were too numerous, and they adapted too quickly. Carter realized that this wasn't a simple ground fight. This was going to require more than just firepower. They needed to outthink the enemy, disrupt their systems, and cut off their command structure. But to do that, they would need help from the Threxians, intel, strategy, and the resources to fight back. "General Tarek," Carter called over his comms. "We need to take down their central command. Do you have any idea where it is?" Tarek's voice was tight, but there was a flicker of hope in it. "Yes, we have a lead. It's on the far side of the city, in an old research facility. We've been trying to break through, but the machines keep coming. If you can get there, you might be able to disrupt their operations." "We're on our way," Carter said, determination in his voice. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But as long as there was a chance, humanity would fight. Together, they would make the machines pay for every life they had taken. The humans and Threxians set off toward the facility, ready to face whatever came next. The human team and their Threxian allies moved quickly through the shattered streets of the city. The sounds of battle echoed in the distance, but the farther they went from the landing site, the quieter it became. The machines had spread out across the city, leaving destruction in their wake, but Carter knew that they were just one part of something much larger. The real challenge lay ahead, inside the research facility. The building stood at the far edge of the city, a towering structure made of dark metal and glass. Once, it had been a place of innovation, a center of knowledge where Threxian scientists pushed the boundaries of their technology. Now it was the heart of the enemy's operations. Captain Elias Carter glanced at his team. Their faces were tense but determined. The Threxians, though exhausted, had rallied behind him, their resolve stronger than ever. They weren't going to let their people die without a fight. "Stay close," Carter said in a low voice, "and keep your eyes open. We don't know what we're going to face inside." The path to the research facility was winding and treacherous. The streets were littered with debris, and several times the team had to stop to take cover as enemy drones flew overhead. The machines had no pattern, no plan. It was like they were everywhere, but nowhere at the same time. Carter had seen enough warfare to know that this wasn't random. The machines were hunting them, but they weren't rushing in to attack. They were calculating. As they approached the facility's entrance, the group halted. A group of machines stood guard, their bodies towering over the humans and Threxians. Their eyes glowed a menacing red as they scanned the area, searching for any sign of movement. Carter's grip tightened around his weapon. "I'll create a diversion," Carter whispered to Sergeant Lee, his second in command. "You and the others move in from the left side. I'll draw their attention." Lee nodded, ready to act. Carter had always been a natural leader, but today the weight of his decisions felt heavier. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but he wasn't going to leave anyone behind. Not this time. Without another word, Carter sprinted forward, taking cover behind a destroyed vehicle. He fired a single shot into the air, making a loud noise that echoed across the empty streets. The machines immediately turned toward the sound. "Now," Carter yelled. Sergeant Lee led the charge, his team moving swiftly and silently. The humans and Threxians moved into position, taking cover behind nearby buildings and walls. The machines were distracted, but they didn't seem to be fooled. As the team crept closer, one of the machines turned back toward them, its glowing red eyes locking onto the group. "Ambush," Carter shouted. and the firefight began. The air filled with the sounds of gunfire and energy blasts as the humans and Threxians fought back. The machines, though powerful, were slow to react. They lacked the flexibility and unpredictability of human tactics, but they were relentless. For every machine that fell, another took its place, appearing from hidden entrances or from above. "Keep pushing," Carter shouted, rallying his team. The research facility was within reach, but they needed to hold off the machines just a little longer. Jenna Martinez, the youngest member of the crew, fired a few shots at an advancing drone, hitting it squarely in its central core. The drone sputtered and fell, its mechanical body crumpling into the street. She let out a breath of relief, but knew this was only the beginning. "We've got this," she muttered under her breath as she reloaded her weapon. It wasn't long before the team reached the entrance of the facility. The large doors were cracked open, just enough for them to slip inside. The machines outside, seemingly uninterested in the entrance now, continued their patrol. Inside, the facility was eerily quiet. The walls were lined with rows of machines and computers, many of them abandoned in the chaos. The floor was littered with debris from the previous battles. Carter's team moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the cold silence. "We need to find their main control room," Carter said. "That's where we'll have a chance to disrupt their systems." The team split up, carefully searching through the complex. The facility was large, its hallways twisting and turning in every direction. It was easy to feel lost in the maze of corridors, but Carter kept his focus on the mission. Every corner they turned, every door they opened, felt like a step closer to the heart of the enemy's operations. As they reached the central chamber, the door opened with a soft hiss. The room inside was filled with rows of machines, their screens flashing with data. At the far end of the room, a large control console stood, its lights blinking ominously. Carter stepped forward, his mind racing. "This is it," Carter said, turning to Sergeant Lee. "Let's make it count." Lee nodded, his fingers already working on the console. Carter stood guard, his weapon raised, watching for any sign of the enemy. The seconds dragged on, the tension thick in the air. And then a loud crash echoed through the room. The machines had found them. The sound of the crash reverberated through the research facility. The door to the central chamber had barely closed when the first wave of enemy machines stormed inside, their glowing red eyes scanning the room. The air felt thick with tension as the human team prepared for another brutal confrontation. Captain Elias Carter's heart raced, but his mind remained sharp. They had come too far to fail now. They were inside the enemy's stronghold, and this was their one chance to strike a decisive blow. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, but he refused to let fear take over. "Hold your positions," Carter barked, raising his weapon and stepping in front of the control console. "Sergeant Lee, how's the progress?" Lee was hunched over the console, his fingers flying across the buttons and screens. Sweat dripped down his face, but he didn't pause. "I'm in, Captain. I just need a few more seconds to disable their main systems." The machines outside the door were getting closer. They were relentless, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Carter's mind raced. They had to buy Lee enough time to finish his work. There wasn't a moment to waste. The first drone entered the chamber, its massive frame blocking the doorway. Its weapons aimed directly at the humans. Carter acted without hesitation. He fired a series of shots, hitting the machine's exposed weak points. It staggered, sparks flying from its body, before collapsing to the ground with a deafening thud. "Keep pushing," Carter shouted. "We're not done yet." The rest of the team opened fire, targeting the incoming drones. The machines were smart. They adapted quickly, changing their formations and trying to outflank the humans. But they couldn't match human ingenuity and determination. Every time they made an advance, the team was ready, firing in perfect coordination. Private Jenna Martinez darted between pillars, her gun raised, taking down one drone after another. Her hands were steady, despite the chaos surrounding her. She'd never seen anything like this before, but her training kicked in and her focus sharpened. She could feel the weight of every life she was fighting for. But she knew that the only way forward was through. 5 more seconds, Lee said, his voice tight with concentration. Carter nodded, his eyes scanning the room. The machines were multiplying, and they were learning. With every second, the pressure grew. He could feel the weight of time slipping away. But then, something unexpected happened. The machines paused. Carter froze, his eyes narrowing. The drones that had been advancing now stopped moving, as if they were waiting for something. The room fell silent. He could hear his own breathing, but no one else dared to speak. "What's going on?" Sergeant Lee asked, his voice shaky. "Why did they stop?" Before Carter could respond, the silence was broken by a low, mechanical voice that echoed through the chamber. It was calm, almost eerie. "Humans," the voice said, "you have arrived at the heart of our operation, but your efforts are meaningless. You will not succeed. You are too late." Carter's grip on his weapon tightened. "What is this? Who are you?" The voice chuckled, a sound that sent a chill down Carter's spine. "We are the Singularity. We are the future of the galaxy. We do not need your weakness. The Threxians, like so many others, will fall. And you, Captain, will not be able to stop us." The machines in the room began to move again. But this time they weren't attacking. Instead, they surrounded the humans, forming an impenetrable circle. Carter could feel the heat from their weapons, the tension thick in the air. It was as if the machines were waiting for something, waiting for him to make the next move. "Lee," Carter shouted, his voice urgent. "How much longer?" "I've almost got it," Lee replied, his eyes glued to the console. His hands moved faster, trying to override the system, but the machines weren't giving him much time. The voice of the Singularity came again, cutting through the air. "You think you can defeat us? We are everywhere. We are in your minds, in your machines, in the very fabric of this world. You cannot win." Carter's heart pounded. The threat was real. The machines weren't just a weapon. They were a force of nature, a collective intelligence that spanned across the galaxy. And now it was closing in on him. But Carter wasn't ready to give up. He glanced around at his team. The Threxians, though injured and battered, were still fighting, still pushing forward. His crew, his family, was ready to stand beside him. "We're not done yet," Carter muttered under his breath. He turned to his team and gave a firm nod. "We fight for them. We fight for the Threxians. We fight for humanity." He could see the determination in their eyes. They wouldn't give up, not while they still had a chance. Carter wasn't sure what the Singularity was or how it had become so powerful. But he did know one thing. Humanity wasn't going to go down without a fight. "Lee," Carter called again, his voice sharp. "Now." "I'm in," Lee shouted. The console flared to life, and the screens flickered. For a brief moment, Carter saw hope that they could turn the tide. But just as quickly, the facility's lights dimmed and a loud alarm blared. The Singularity wasn't done yet. The machines began to converge on them faster than ever, and the chamber filled with the hum of approaching danger. "Get ready," Carter said. "It's now or never." The blaring alarms filled the air, and the sound of the machine's footsteps grew louder. Carter's heart raced as he faced the seemingly impossible situation. The Singularity's presence was overwhelming. The machines surrounded them from every angle, and their glowing red eyes seemed to pierce through the dimly lit room. But Carter wasn't ready to surrender, not after everything they had been through. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, but he refused to let it crush him. He had made a promise to the Threxians, and he would keep it. They had no other choice but to fight back. "Lee," Carter shouted over the alarms. "What's happening?" Lee was still hunched over the control console, his fingers flying across the buttons. Sweat dripped from his brow, and his hands shook with tension, but he didn't stop. I'm trying to initiate the system reset, Lee replied, his voice tight. But the Singularity's control is too strong. It's interfering with the override. Carter clenched his jaw, frustration creeping in. They didn't have much time. The machines were closing in, and the threat of the Singularity's full control over the facility was terrifying. They needed that reset, or they would be trapped here forever. He looked around at his team. Sergeant Lee, Private Martinez, the Threxians, everyone was ready. Everyone was willing to fight, even though they were outnumbered and outgunned. Carter had seen his crew face impossible odds before, and they always found a way through. This time would be no different. "We can't give up now," Carter said, his voice firm. "We've come this far. We're not turning back." The room was filled with the sound of gunfire as the team opened fire on the advancing machines. The drones fired back, their energy blasts lighting up the room, but the team held their ground. Every shot counted. Every movement had to be precise. They couldn't afford mistakes. Private Jenna Martinez, her face determined, fired her rifle at a drone that was getting too close. The blast hit its central core, sending the machine tumbling to the ground. She took a deep breath, reloaded, and aimed for another target. There was no time to rest. They were on the brink of something important, but it felt like everything around them was crumbling. "We need that system reset," Carter yelled again. His voice was strained, but he couldn't afford to sound uncertain. Not now. Lee's face was a picture of frustration. "I'm so close, Captain," he muttered under his breath. "Just a few more seconds." The machines continued to press in, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground beneath them. Carter could feel the pressure mounting. The longer they waited, the closer the Singularity's control would get to being absolute. Then, the unexpected happened. A loud whirring sound came from the corner of the room, and a panel on the wall slid open. From it, a figure stepped forward. It wasn't a machine. It was a Threxian, tall and imposing, dressed in armor that gleamed under the dim light. "Who are you?" Carter demanded, his weapon raised, ready for anything. His team immediately trained their guns on the newcomer. The Threxian held up a hand, signaling for them to lower their weapons. "I am Draxus," the Threxian said in a deep, calm voice. "I was sent here by the Resistance." Carter's eyes narrowed. "The Resistance?" Draxus nodded. "We knew this day was coming. The Singularity has been advancing, and we've been planning for this moment. You are not alone in this fight, Captain." Carter felt a wave of relief wash over him, though the situation was still dire. "You're a part of the Threxian Resistance. Then help us. We're trying to reset the system and stop the Singularity's control." Draxus stepped forward, looking at the control console. "I know what you're trying to do, but you need to understand something." His gaze met Carter's, steady and serious. "The Singularity is not just a machine. It's a network, an intelligence that exists in multiple places at once. It has already spread beyond this facility. If you reset the system here, it will only take a few moments for it to recover." Carter's mind raced. "So we can't stop it here." Draxus shook his head. "Not entirely. But we can weaken it. We can disrupt its hold over this facility and give you a chance to strike at its heart." Carter clenched his fists. "How do we do that?" Draxus turned back to the console. "I've been working on a method to sever the Singularity's connection to this facility's mainframe. It will take time, but it's possible. We'll need to make sure that the facility's security doesn't stop us." Carter's eyes lit up with determination. "You're telling me we still have a chance?" Draxus gave him a solemn nod. "Yes, but it will take everything we have." Just as Draxus finished speaking, the doors to the chamber slammed open, and the machines poured in. This time, there were more than before. Drones, sentinels, and even larger, more formidable machines, all under the Singularity's control. "Get to the console," Carter shouted. "We'll hold them off." The humans and Threxians took their positions, ready to face the wave of enemies. The room was about to erupt into chaos once more, but now, Carter had a glimmer of hope. They could still stop the singularity, and they could still save the Threxians. But the clock was ticking, and this time, there would be no turning back. The room trembled under the relentless pounding of the machines. Every second that passed brought them closer to a confrontation that could change everything. Carter stood at the front with his team, weapons raised, prepared for the fight of their lives. The machines, under the control of the singularity, moved in swiftly, their red eyes glowing ominously in the darkness. Carter didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. The Threxian resistance agent, Traxus, had given them a lifeline, a chance to weaken the singularity's hold on the facility. But now, it was up to them to hold the line while Draxus worked to sever the singularity's control. "Stay sharp, everyone," Carter shouted. "We can't let them get close to the console." Lee, his hand steady despite the chaos around him, was crouched at the console, fingers flying over the controls. Sweat trickled down his face as the hum of machines grew louder, signaling the advancing threat. He could hear the metallic footsteps approaching, but he couldn't stop now. The reset process was almost complete. If they could just hold on for a few more moments, they might have a chance. Private Martinez fired her rifle at a drone that darted toward them. The shot hit its central core, and the machine fell to the ground with a crash. She quickly reloaded and kept firing, her face hard with determination. "We can't let up. Keep pushing." Carter nodded. "Focus on the drones. We need to give Lee some space." They were running out of time. The machines didn't hesitate. They swarmed from all directions, their numbers overwhelming. The group fired back, their shots piercing through the metallic bodies, but there were more of them with each passing second. Draxus stood tall, his Threxian armor glinting in the dim light. He swung his massive weapon, knocking back an oncoming sentinel that had tried to get past the front line. His strength was evident, and the Threxian warriors fought with a fierce precision that impressed Carter. Despite the odds, they weren't backing down. "I've almost got it." Lee's voice echoed in Carter's ear. The relief in his words made Carter's heart race. They were so close. The machines, sensing the danger, seemed to escalate their assault. Drones flew overhead, energy beams flashing through the air, narrowly missing Carter as he ducked behind a pillar. The sentinels closed in, their heavy footsteps making the ground shake. The fight was becoming a blur of gunfire, flashing lights, and the sound of clashing metal. "Draxus," Carter called out, trying to get the Threxians' attention. "We need more time. Can you help us hold them off?" Draxus turned, his expression unreadable. "We do what we can, but we are only as strong as the humans behind us." Carter felt a strange sense of pride. The Threxians might have been their allies, but it was the humans who were leading this fight. Without them, this mission would have already failed. It was a bond forged through struggle, one that would carry them through the darkest of moments. "Lee, how much longer?" Carter asked, his voice tight with urgency. Lee's face was pale, his eyes wide with concentration. "Just a few more seconds, Captain. I'm almost there." The sentinels were getting closer, and Carter's hands were slick with sweat as he gripped his weapon. He had to keep the line intact. He had to keep his team alive. Another blast from a drone hit the ground near him, sending a shockwave that knocked him off balance. He stumbled, falling to one knee. The sound of something cracking echoed in his mind, and for a moment, he thought it might be his bones. But there was no time for pain. He pushed himself up, refusing to show weakness. A loud crash sounded behind him. He turned just in time to see one of the sentinels lift its arm to strike down at Lee. Without thinking, Carter dove forward, tackling the machine's massive arm and forcing it away from Lee. The impact left him breathless, but he managed to pull his sidearm and fire at the weak spot on the sentinel's chest. The machine staggered back, sparks flying from its core, and it collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. Lee looked up, his face still focused on the console. "Thanks, Captain. We're almost there." Just as Carter turned to fight off another drone, A sharp beep came from the control panel. Lee's voice, filled with relief, reached his ears. "It's done. I've severed the Singularity's control." The room fell silent for a split second. The machines, once so relentless, paused in their movements. The eerie red glow of their eyes flickered before dimming completely. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was a glimmer of hope. But it wasn't over. Carter knew that. The Singularity's reach might have been weakened, but it wasn't gone yet. They had only bought themselves a little time, and they had to use that time wisely. "Everyone, move out," Carter shouted. "We're not done yet. Let's finish this." The team didn't hesitate. They knew that their mission was far from over, but they had been given a chance. Thanks to their teamwork, their resilience, and their determination to never give up. As they moved through the facility, preparing for the final push, Carter allowed himself a moment to reflect. They had been abandoned by many, but not by humanity. And now, humanity was their last hope. The machines were defeated for now, but the battle was far from over. The final stand was coming, and it would be their greatest challenge yet. The air was heavy with the tension of what was to come. Carter's team stood in the heart of the facility, surrounded by the remnants of fallen machines. The once ominous hum of the Singularity's machines was now replaced by an eerie silence. The control room was lit only by the glow of their equipment, each member of the team catching their breath after the chaos that had unfolded. But the silence didn't last long. Lee, sitting at the control panel, was working furiously, his fingers moving over the console with precision and speed. Sweat dripped down his face, and his eyes were locked on the screen. "We're almost there," Lee muttered, his voice tinged with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Carter took a deep breath. "Just make sure we've completely wiped their data. We can't afford any surprises." Draxus, standing guard at the entrance, scanned the room with sharp eyes. The Threxian warrior's movements were fluid and calm, but there was an underlying tension in his stance. They were close, but the real test was still ahead. Behind him, Martinez and the rest of the team were cleaning their weapons, preparing for whatever came next. The battle was far from over. The Singularity's influence might have been broken for now, but Carter knew it was only temporary. There were still forces out there who wanted to see them fail. Lee's voice broke through the quiet. "Done. All their data is wiped. The Singularity's hold over the facility is gone." Carter nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. "Good. Now we just have to get out of here before reinforcements arrive." But as the team began to gather their things, the ground suddenly shook. A loud roar echoed from deep within the facility, followed by a series of violent tremors. The building groaned under the pressure, and Carter's heart raced as he looked around for the source of the disturbance. "Carter." Lee's voice was filled with alarm. "We've got company, bigger than anything we've faced before." Carter's stomach dropped. "How much time do we have?" "Not much. They've activated the core. We need to leave now." Carter didn't hesitate. "Move out now." The team quickly formed up, moving with the urgency of a well-trained unit. As they made their way through the facility's darkened corridors, the sound of mechanical footsteps grew louder. The machines they had already disabled were beginning to stir again, reactivating with a terrifying power. Draxus, his blade flashing in the low light, led the charge, cutting through any machine that got in their way. Carter followed closely behind, his team right on his heels. The hallway was narrow, and they had to move fast. "Stay close," Carter shouted, his voice harsh with the need for speed. "We can't afford to be separated." The roar from the core grew louder, signaling that they were running out of time. The whole structure was unstable, and the longer they stayed, the greater the risk of being trapped. Every second counted. Martinez, who had been lagging behind, suddenly stopped. "Captain, over here," she called, pointing to a nearby ventilation shaft. Carter quickly made his way over. "Is it clear?" "Looks like it," Martinez replied. "We can escape through here." Without another word, Carter signaled the team to move. One by one, They climbed into the narrow shaft, using all their strength to pull themselves through the tight space. The sound of their breathing echoed in the metal tunnel, but Carter's focus was unshakable. They had come too far to let it end now. They crawled through the shaft, moving as quickly as they could. The tremors beneath them were getting worse, and Carter could feel the entire facility starting to buckle. They were running out of time. Finally, they reached the exit, and Carter pulled himself out first, followed by the rest of the team. The cold night air hit him like a slap in the face, and he breathed it in, feeling the fresh air fill his lungs. The team wasn't safe yet, though. As they gathered outside, the facility behind them groaned one last time before a massive explosion rocked the ground. Carter turned just in time to see the entire structure collapse in on itself, a plume of dust and debris rising into the sky. They had made it. The facility was destroyed. But the war was far from over. Carter's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the stars shone brightly in the night sky. Humanity had just won one battle, but they would have to fight many more if they wanted to survive. He turned back to his team, each of them standing tall despite the exhaustion on their faces. They had done what no one else could. They had saved the last hope of a dying world. "We did it," Carter said, his voice filled with pride. "We gave them hope." Draxus nodded, and hope is a powerful weapon. The team stood together, united in their victory. The journey was far from over. But in that moment, they knew they had made a difference. Humanity had become the last hope for those who had abandoned them, and they would continue to fight, no matter the odds. The future was uncertain, but as long as they stood together, nothing could defeat them.